In the years following Alexander the Great's death, one of his former generals, Ptolemy, established a new ruling dynasty in Egypt. He founded his capital at the recently established coastal city of Alexandria. With his successors, he pursued one of the most ambitious intellectual projects the ancient world had ever attempted. They aimed to collect a copy of essentially every significant written work then known to exist. This ambitious project was established in the early 3rd century BC under Ptolemy I. It was considerably expanded under his son Ptolemy II and became known as the Great Library of Alexandria. It functioned as part of a broader research institution called the Museum, a shrine dedicated to the Muses. The Muses were the Greek goddesses associated with the arts and sciences. The Museum was unprecedented, a state-funded research institution bringing together scholars from across the Mediterranean. The state provided them housing, meals, and considerable resources specifically to pursue scholarly research and writing. Ancient sources describe aggressive and sometimes ethically questionable methods used to expand the collection. Ships arriving in the harbor were reportedly required to surrender any books aboard for copying. The library would retain the original and provide only a copy back to the original owner. This reflected the singular priority of Alexandria's rulers to build the most comprehensive collection possible. They pursued this even at the expense of standard property considerations that might otherwise apply. Historians estimate the library may have eventually held anywhere from several 100,000 to over 1,000,000 scrolls. This represented an extraordinary concentration of the ancient world's accumulated written knowledge within a single institution. The collection was unmatched by any comparable library elsewhere in the ancient Mediterranean world. The Ptolemaic rulers were motivated by both intellectual curiosity and calculated political strategy. Establishing Alexandria as the center of Greek scholarship helped legitimize their position as foreign rulers. As Macedonian Greeks governing Egypt, this political consideration was just as meaningful as any intellectual motivation. The royal sponsors ensured the library's ambitious scope left a legacy that shaped the history of knowledge forever. Understanding how the Library of Alexandria actually functioned requires appreciating the genuinely labor-intensive process of ancient scholarship. Ancient written works were collected, copied, and preserved within its walls through meticulous effort. Unlike modern printed books, papyrus scrolls required considerable individual scribal labor to reproduce and maintain. The library employed teams of scribes whose primary responsibility involved copying acquired texts to expand the collection. They also created replacement copies as older scrolls gradually deteriorated through natural aging and handling over time. Papyrus required periodic replacement to maintain a text's long-term accessibility and legibility for ongoing scholarly use. Alexandria's scholars engaged in significant textual scholarship beyond simple collection and copying. They worked toward establishing authoritative, carefully corrected versions of important texts, particularly the works of Homer. Various manuscript versions contained meaningful textual variations that Alexandrian scholars worked to compare and reconcile. They aimed to create the most historically accurate version, representing a sophisticated early methodology of textual criticism. The library's organizational system involved careful cataloging methods to manage the enormous collection. The scholar Callimachus developed an extensive bibliographic catalog known as the Pinnaces. He organized the collection by subject matter and author, a significant early precursor to modern library classification systems. This made the Library of Alexandria an active, dynamic center of ongoing scholarly research and intellectual production. It attracted the ancient Mediterranean world's most significant scholars and scientists across several centuries. Scribal labor required specialized skill, especially for technical fields including mathematics and astronomy. Scribes had to correctly reproduce complex diagrams and numerical tables without introducing errors that would compromise the text. This ensured that carefully maintained copies remained useful for future researchers consulting the library's treasures. The Library of Alexandria and its associated museum research institution attracted an extraordinary concentration of significant ancient scholars and scientists. Historians emphasize that their collective intellectual achievements represent among the most significant scientific and mathematical accomplishments of the entire ancient world. Euclid, whose mathematical work Elements would serve as the foundational geometry textbook for well over 2,000 years of subsequent mathematical education. He conducted his foundational research and teaching at Alexandria, representing one of the most enduringly influential intellectual achievements associated with this remarkable institution. Eratosthenes, who served as the library's head librarian, achieved a remarkable scientific accomplishment by calculating the Earth's circumference with impressive accuracy. Using careful observation of shadow angles and sophisticated mathematical reasoning, his calculated figure came within a small margin of the Earth's modern measured circumference. Hero of Alexandria demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of mechanical principles, including early steam-powered devices like the Aeolipile. The astronomer Hipparchus also conducted careful astronomical observations, providing foundational groundwork that later astronomers, including Claude Ptolemy, would continue building upon. This concentration of achievement reflects the sustained intellectual environment Alexandria maintained, providing scholars considerable resources and access to unparalleled written knowledge. Significantly, the museum offered direct intellectual community, with fellow leading scholars working across numerous different fields of ancient scientific and mathematical inquiry. The museum's structure, providing scholars with housing and meals, represents a genuinely early precursor to the modern concept of state-funded academic research institutions. This model would not be widely replicated until many centuries later, making the museum a significant milestone in the development of organized scientific research. Alexandria's museum remains an underappreciated early milestone in the broader historical development of scholarly research as an institutionally supported human endeavor. Beyond the main library collection housed within the Royal Palace District, Alexandria also maintained a secondary library collection housed within the Serapeum, a significant temple complex dedicated to the syncretic deity Serapis, whose worship combined elements of both Greek and Egyptian religious tradition, reflecting Alexandria's broader distinctive cultural fusion of Greek and Egyptian civilization. This secondary collection, historians studying available ancient sources generally believe, served partly as a genuine backup or supplementary collection to the main royal library. Though the precise historical relationship and relative significance between these two distinct library collections remains subject to some genuine ongoing scholarly uncertainty, given the limited, direct ancient documentary evidence describing the library's precise internal organizational structure across its several centuries of historical operation. The Serapeum itself represented a genuinely significant religious and cultural institution within Alexandria, entirely independent of its library function, serving as a major center of worship and pilgrimage that historians consider among the city's most architecturally and culturally significant structures, reflecting Alexandria's broader historical role as a genuine crossroads connecting Greek, Egyptian, and, during the later Roman period, broader Mediterranean traditions within a single, remarkably cosmopolitan ancient urban environment. This secondary library collection would ultimately prove historically significant in a manner its original founders could not have anticipated. Since the Serapeum's eventual destruction in 391 AD represents one of the more clearly documented specific destructive events, historians can confidently associate with the broader, extended decline of Alexandria's library tradition, even as considerable scholarly uncertainty continues surrounding exactly how much of the original book collection remained housed within the Serapeum, specifically by this later historical period, several centuries after the library's original ambitious founding. Popular historical memory frequently attributes the Library of Alexandria's destruction to a single dramatic fire connected to Julius Caesar's military intervention in 48 BC. However, modern historians believe this genuinely documented event caused meaningful but considerably less than total destruction of the library's overall collection and institutional function. Ancient sources, including Plutarch writing much later, confirm a fire occurred during Caesar's conflict, specifically connecting it to warehouses near the harbor. These scrolls were likely awaiting export, rather than representing the entirety of the main collection housed within the library's primary institutional buildings. The 48 BC fire likely caused meaningful loss, but probably not the complete destruction that popular memory attributes to this specific event. Multiple ancient sources writing after 48 BC continue describing a functioning library and scholarly community at Alexandria for several subsequent centuries. This correction matters because understanding the library's gradual decline offers a more accurate view of how ancient institutions actually faded over time. The decline reflected complex patterns connected to shifting political priorities, funding availability, and broader historical circumstances across an extended period. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio offer varying accounts of the fire's extent, a discrepancy that modern scholars must carefully navigate. While some destruction of books did occur, the evidence does not confirm the total destruction that later traditions would eventually associate with Caesar's campaign. Rather than a single catastrophic destructive event, the historically accurate account of the Library of Alexandria's decline involves multiple contributing factors. Events unfolded gradually across roughly 3 to 4 centuries following the initial fire in 48 BC, creating a complex historical narrative. Responsible historical treatment must present this accurately, rather than favoring a simpler, more dramatically satisfying, but less precise single-event narrative. Political instability within the later Roman Empire, particularly during the turbulent 3rd century AD, contributed to declining state support and funding. Historians note a military conflict during Emperor Aurelian's reign in the 270s AD that caused significant damage to portions of Alexandria. This included the royal palace district associated with the library's original location, representing another genuine factor toward the institution's gradual decline. The Serapeum and its associated secondary book collection suffered significant, well-documented destruction in 391 AD. This was connected to religious conflict following Emperor Theodosius's official prohibition of pagan religious practice throughout the Roman Empire. The Serapeum, as a prominent pagan religious site, became a target during this period of conflict and property destruction. Beyond these events, historians emphasize that gradual defunding and reduced scholarly patronage contributed just as significantly to the library's end. Shifting political and cultural priorities across the Roman imperial period reflected a mundane but historically accurate pattern of gradual institutional decline. This pattern is familiar from numerous other historical institutions, rather than the singular dramatic catastrophe popular historical memory frequently prefers. Determining precisely what specific written works were lost through the Library of Alexandria's gradual decline represents a genuinely difficult historical question, since, by definition, we possess direct knowledge only of texts that survived through other means. While texts existing exclusively within Alexandria's collection would have vanished entirely without leaving clear evidence of their prior existence and specific content. Historians studying ancient literary and scientific references can identify certain specific works ancient authors mention or quote that do not survive in any modern form, suggesting these particular texts may have existed primarily within collections like Alexandria's library before being lost during its extended historical decline. Though it remains difficult to determine if a specific loss connects to Alexandria specifically, or the broader loss of texts across the Mediterranean world. It is worth noting that the ancient world experienced extensive, ongoing loss of written material through numerous different causes well beyond any single library's fate, including the simple, gradual physical deterioration of papyrus and other ancient writing materials over extended time periods. The disruption associated with numerous ancient conflicts and political transitions occurring across the broader Mediterranean world, and the practical reality that maintaining and copying ancient texts required continuous institutional investment that many collections ultimately failed to maintain. This broader historical context does not diminish the significant loss connected to Alexandria's decline, but it suggests that focusing exclusively on Alexandria oversimplifies the broader, more complex pattern of ancient textual loss across many institutions, affecting numerous collections across the ancient Mediterranean world for many different reasons, across many different historical periods. Despite its gradual institutional decline across several centuries, Alexandria continued functioning as a significant center of scholarly activity longer than popular narratives acknowledge. Historians identify continued intellectual achievement occurring at Alexandria well into the later Roman and early Byzantine historical periods. Hypatia, a significant mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher, represents the most well-documented example of Alexandria's continued, if by this period diminished, scholarly tradition. She taught philosophy and mathematics to students drawn from across the eastern Mediterranean before her own violent death in 415 AD. Historians connect this event to broader religious and political tensions within Alexandria during this turbulent period. It did not represent a specific attack on the original library institution, which had already declined from its earlier peak centuries before. This continued activity reinforces the broader historical picture of Alexandria's gradual, extended decline rather than a sudden termination. Intellectual work continued across centuries following specific events, including the 48 BC fire and the 391 AD Serapeum destruction. Popular memory frequently, and somewhat inaccurately, identifies these events as the library's definitive, singular ending point. Hypatia's tragic fate has become entangled with popular Library of Alexandria mythology in ways historians urge genuine caution regarding. Conflating her death with the institutional decline of the library risks, obscuring the more historically accurate, complex narrative. This documentary has worked to carefully present this nuanced reality of Alexandria's long intellectual legacy. In recognition of the historical Library of Alexandria's genuine significance and enduring symbolic importance, the modern Egyptian government, with considerable international support and funding, constructed a new library, known as the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, opened in 2002, directly near the historical ancient library's approximate original location. This modern institution, while making no claim toward literal historical continuity with the ancient library it deliberately commemorates, represents a genuinely significant symbolic and practical effort toward reviving Alexandria's historical association with scholarship, knowledge preservation, and international intellectual collaboration, incorporating modern research facilities, extensive physical and digital collections, and ongoing scholarly and cultural programming, reflecting the same essential intellectual ambition that originally motivated the ancient library's founding well over 2,000 years earlier. The modern library's very existence, historians and cultural commentators studying this project note, reflects the genuine, enduring symbolic power the ancient Library of Alexandria continues to hold within global cultural imagination, representing not merely a specific historical institution that gradually declined and eventually ceased meaningful operation many centuries ago, but an enduring, powerful symbol of humanity's broader aspiration toward collecting, preserving, and sharing accumulated knowledge across generations and civilizations. This enduring symbolic significance, arguably, matters just as genuinely as the specific historical details regarding exactly how and when the ancient library actually declined, since the ancient Library of Alexandria's most significant and lasting legacy may ultimately rest less in its specific historical operational details, many of which remain genuinely uncertain, given limited surviving ancient documentation, than in the powerful, enduring cultural ideal it continues to represent regarding the fundamental human value of collecting and preserving knowledge for the benefit of both contemporary and future generations. The popular, simplified narrative regarding the Library of Alexandria's dramatic single-event destruction, while historically imprecise in significant ways this documentary has worked to carefully correct, nonetheless reflects genuine, understandable human fascination with a powerful underlying historical truth. That immense human knowledge and scholarly achievement was indeed genuinely lost, Through Alexandria's extended historical decline, even if the actual historical process unfolded considerably more gradually and through more complex causation than popular legend typically suggests. Understanding the more historically accurate, gradual decline narrative does not diminish the genuine tragedy of what was actually lost, but rather offers a more historically honest, and in certain respects more genuinely instructive, account of how significant institutions and accumulated knowledge can decline not through single dramatic catastrophe alone, but through the accumulated effect of political instability, shifting priorities, inadequate ongoing investment, and simple, gradual neglect extending across many years, and in Alexandria's specific case, several centuries of extended historical decline. This more accurate historical understanding carries genuine, broader relevance extending well beyond Alexandria's specific ancient historical circumstances, offering a valuable, historically grounded reminder regarding the genuine fragility of accumulated human knowledge and cultural achievement, and the continuous, sustained institutional commitment required to preserve such achievement across generations, a lesson historians and librarians studying this period consistently identify as carrying genuine ongoing relevance for how modern societies approach the preservation and continued support of their own knowledge institutions today. The Library of Alexandria, understood accurately rather than through simplified popular legend, ultimately offers a genuinely more complex, more historically honest, and, in its own considerably less dramatically tidy way, an equally powerful story, not of sudden, singular, catastrophic loss, but of gradual decline against which dedicated scholars for several centuries continued working, teaching, and preserving whatever knowledge they could, for exactly as long as circumstances genuinely allowed them to continue.